What if we told you that some of the greatest acts of courage, brilliance, and sheer human kindness went largely unnoticed by the world? What if the heroes who saved millions or changed the course of history are names you might not even recognize? Prepare to have your mind blown as we unveil the silent champions who deserve their moment in the spotlight. Number 10. Dolores Huerta, the quiet force behind a revolution. Imagine dedicating your entire life to fighting for the rights of the most vulnerable, only to have your monumental contributions often overshadowed. That is the story of Dolores Huerta, a powerhouse labor leader and civil rights activist whose name, while gaining more recognition today, still does not resonate with the same widespread familiarity. Yet, her impact on American labor and civil rights is nothing short of revolutionary, shaping the lives of countless farm workers and inspiring generations. Born in New Mexico in 1930, Dolores Clara Fernandez Huerta grew up in Stockton, California, a hub for agricultural workers. Her mother, a successful businesswoman and community activist, instilled in Dolores a deep sense of social justice and independence from a young age. Dolores herself started her career as a teacher, and it was in the classrooms of California that she first witnessed the profound injustices faced by farm workers' children. They were often malnourished, lacked proper clothing, and frequently had to leave school to work in the fields alongside their parents. This direct observation ignited a fire in Dolores, compelling her to act, to move beyond the classroom and into the fields of advocacy. In 1955, she joined the Community Service Organization, a Latina civil rights group, where she began organizing voter registration drives and fighting for economic justice for low-income communities. It was here that she met Fred Ross, a renowned community organizer who became her mentor. Her commitment and fierce intelligence quickly made her a saint, but it was a meeting in 1960 that truly set her path. She met Cesar Chavez, another dedicated organizer, and together they shared a radical vision to create an organization dedicated solely to improving the lives of farm workers who were among the most exploited laborers in America. Farm workers had virtually no legal protections, were paid pitiful wages, and lived in deplorable conditions. In 1962, Huerta and Chavez founded the United Farm Workers, originally named the National Farm Workers Association. While Chavez became the public face and modic leader of the movement, Dolores Huerta was the strategic genius, the relentless negotiator, and the tireless organizer working behind the scenes. Her understanding of labor law was exceptional, and she possessed a remarkable ability to communicate complex issues in simple, compelling terms to workers who were often illiterate and disenfranchised. She famously coined the rallying cry, "Si, Seaton," which translates to, "Yes, we can," a phrase that would later inspire movements far beyond the farm workers' struggle. Her work involved incredibly dangerous and exhausting conditions. She organized strikes, boycotted campaigns, and lobbied politicians, often putting her own safety at risk. In 1965, the UABDU launched the Delano Grape Strike, a monumental 5-year struggle that brought national attention to the plight of farm workers. Dolores was at the forefront of this movement, leading picket lines, managing union affairs, and negotiating contracts with powerful agricultural corporations. Her negotiating skills were legendary. She was known for her calm demeanor, her sharp intellect, and her unwavering determination to secure better wages and working conditions for the farm workers. Records show that during the negotiations with grape growers, it was often Huerta who meticulously dissected contracts and pushed for critical concessions, ensuring that the workers truly benefited. One of the most pivotal moments was the nationwide boycott of California grapes. Dolores traveled extensively across the United States, urging consumers to stop buying grapes until growers recognized the union and agreed to fair contracts. Her passionate speeches and tireless advocacy helped transform a local labor dispute into a national movement for social justice. It was this boycott, largely orchestrated and sustained by her relentless efforts and organizing prowess, that eventually forced grape growers to the negotiating table and led to the first collective bargaining agreements for farm workers in American history. These agreements brought dignity, better pay, and safer working conditions to tens of thousands of workers who had previously been powerless. Despite her indispensable role, historical narratives often place Cesar Chavez at the center of the UFW's triumphs, a testament to the way women's leadership, especially in male-dominated movements, can be overlooked or minimized. Huerta herself faced discrimination and sexism within the movement, but she never wavered in her commitment. She continued to fight for farm worker rights, advocate for women's rights, and champion immigration reform for decades. Her contributions went beyond simply organizing. She was instrumental in passing legislation that provided unemployment insurance and disability benefits for farm workers, protections that were virtually unheard of for agricultural laborers at the time. In 1988, Dolores Huerta was brutally beaten by a San Francisco police officer during a peaceful protest, resulting in severe internal injuries that required extensive recovery. Despite this traumatic experience, she remained an unwavering advocate for social justice, continuing her activism well into her 90s. She founded the Dolores Huerta Foundation, which focuses on community organizing, leadership, development, and civic engagement. While she has received numerous accolades, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2012, her story often remains less prominent in general historical accounts compared to some of her male counterparts. Yet, her courage, strategic brilliance, and lifelong dedication fundamentally reshaped the American labor landscape and empowered countless individuals. Her legacy is woven into the fabric of human and labor rights in the United States, a testament to an unsung hero who quietly but powerfully moved mountains. Number 9. Frances Glessner Lee, the mother of forensic science. Imagine a world without crime scene investigation as we know it, where evidence was often overlooked and crucial details missed. Then picture a wealthy socialite, a woman from a privileged background, who in the early 20th century revolutionized the very foundations of forensic science, all through a series of meticulously crafted miniature death scenes. Meet Frances Glessner Lee, an unsung hero whose peculiar hobby laid the groundwork for modern crime scene analysis and detective training. Born in 1878 into a prominent Chicago family, Frances Glessner was raised in a time when women of her social standing were expected to pursue marriage and domestic life, not intellectual or professional careers. She was denied the opportunity to attend Harvard University despite her keen intellect and interest in medicine and law, simply because she was a woman. This early setback, however, did not diminish her sharp mind or her determination to contribute meaningfully to the world. Frances developed an unusual fascination with the details of death, not out of morbid curiosity, but out of a profound belief that proper investigation could prevent miscarriages of justice. Her interest was sparked and nurtured by her friendship with George Burgess Magrath, a Harvard Medical School professor and a medical examiner, who lamented the amateurish and often negligent methods employed by law enforcement in investigating suspicious deaths. He told her stories of crime scenes botched, crucial evidence destroyed, and killers walking free due to lack of proper training among investigators. These tales deeply troubled Frances. She understood that real-life crime scenes were chaotic, intimidating, and often overwhelming for officers with little training. To address this, she conceived of a revolutionary idea: to create miniature, perfectly scaled dioramas of death scenes that could be used to train police officers and investigators to meticulously observe, analyze, and interpret evidence without the pressure of a real-life scenario. These were not just dollhouses, they were intricate, chillingly accurate reconstructions of violent deaths, complete with tiny bloodstains, minuscule weapons, and precisely placed objects. Between 1946 and 1952, Frances Glessner Lee, known as the mother of forensic science, created 20 of these highly detailed dioramas, which she called the nutshell studies of unexplained death. Each nutshell was a three-dimensional puzzle, a frozen moment in time designed to force the observer to notice every minute detail. They depicted real cases, often taken from Magrath's files, from domestic disputes to suicides and accidental deaths. For example, one study might feature a tiny woman slumped in a chair, a miniature pistol on the floor, and a faint smear of what appears to be blood on the wall. Another might show a minuscule body crammed into a closet, with specific details like the condition of the furniture, the position of window shades, and the clothing on the victim, all offering subtle clues. Precision of her work was astounding. She handcrafted every single item in the dioramas, from the tiny bottles of milk in a miniature refrigerator to the perfectly scaled furniture and clothing. She painstakingly recreated the textures of fabrics, the patterns on wallpaper, and even the effects of rigor mortis on the tiny doll victims. The level of detail was so exacting that she used actual human hair for the victims, ensuring the most realistic appearance possible. It is documented that she would spend months, sometimes years, on a single nutshell, ensuring every detail contributed to the narrative of the scene and presented a challenge for investigators. These nutshell studies became the cornerstone of her forensic seminars, which she hosted at Harvard Medical School. She would gather experienced police officers and detectives and present them with a nutshell. Their task was to solve the crime by observing every detail, drawing conclusions about what happened, and identifying potential evidence, just as they would at a real crime scene. These were not easy puzzles. They were designed to be incredibly complex and often ambiguous, forcing the trainees to think critically and methodically. Historians of forensic science note that her methods fundamentally shifted the paradigm of crime scene investigation from guesswork to scientific observation. Frances Glessner Lee also became the first woman appointed to the Harvard Medical School faculty, a remarkable achievement for her time and background, though she held no formal degree. She even endowed the Harvard Associates in Police Science, which continues to provide advanced training for law enforcement. She was a fierce advocate for improving the professionalism of police work, particularly in the investigation of homicides. Her unique hands-on teaching, approach through the nutshell studies, helped train generations of investigators to approach crime scenes with an unprecedented level of rigor and scientific precision. Despite her profound impact, Frances Glessner Lee remains largely unknown outside of forensic circles. Her work, though foundational, was often viewed as a woman's hobby by some of her male contemporaries, even as they benefited immensely from her innovations. The very idea of using miniature dollhouses for such serious training seemed unconventional, almost whimsical to many. Yet, her nutshell studies are still used today by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Maryland for training purposes, a testament to their enduring relevance and the brilliance of their creator. Her quiet, persistent work, born out of a passion for justice and a keen eye for detail, fundamentally reshaped how crimes are investigated, making her a truly unsung hero in the annals of science and law enforcement. Number 8. James Harrison, the man with the golden arm. What if one person, through a simple, repetitive act of kindness, could save the lives of millions, including countless newborn babies? It sounds like a superhero comic book, but for James Harrison, an ordinary Australian man, it was the reality of his life for over 60 years. His extraordinary biological gift, combined with his unwavering generosity, earned him the nickname the man with the golden arm, and solidified his place as one of history's most adult yet widely unsung heroes. Born in 1936, James Harrison's journey into medical marvel began when he was just 14 years old. He underwent major chest surgery, a procedure that required a significant amount of blood transfusion to save his life. The experience deeply affected him. Lying in the hospital, recovering, he made a solemn vow. When he was old enough, he would donate blood to help others, just as strangers had helped him. This simple promise, made by a grateful teenager, would blossom into a lifetime of unparalleled medical contribution. He started donating blood as soon as he turned 18. After a few years, doctors discovered something truly extraordinary about his blood. It contained a rare and powerful antibody. This antibody was specifically potent against the rhesus disease, also known as hemolytic disease of the newborn. Rhesus disease is a condition where a pregnant woman's blood, if she has O-negative blood and her baby has O-apparent blood, inherited from the father, can develop antibodies that attack the baby's red blood cells. In severe cases, this can lead to miscarriage, stillbirth, or severe brain damage and jaundice in the newborn. Before the discovery of Harrison's unique blood, rhesus disease was a major cause of infant mortality and disability. Medical researchers, particularly Dr. John Gorman and Professor Ronald Finn, had been working on developing an anti-D-immunoglobulin vaccine, BRIG, that could prevent rhesus disease. This vaccine, given to RAIR-negative mothers, stops their immune system from producing dangerous antibodies. Critical component of this vaccine was the rare antibody found in James Harrison's blood plasma. His plasma was essentially a living, breathing cure. From 1954 onwards, James Harrison began donating his plasma every week, sometimes twice a week. He did this for an astonishing 60 years. Each donation took time, energy, and a commitment that few could sustain. He endured countless needle pokes, hours spent hooked up to apheresis machines, all while maintaining a quiet, humble demeanor. He was an unsung hero in the purest sense because his work was behind the scenes, literally flowing through tubes, saving lives he would never meet, never see. His plasma was used to create the anti-D vaccine, which was then administered to millions of RAIR-negative pregnant women in Australia and around the world. Impact was immediate and profound. Before the vaccine became widely available, thousands of babies in Australia alone died or suffered severe brain damage each year due to rhesus disease. After the widespread use of the anti-D vaccine derived from Harrison's blood, the number of deaths plummeted dramatically. Statistical records from the Australian Red Cross Blood Service indicate that James Harrison's donations are directly credited with saving over 2.4 million babies in Australia. This figure includes his own daughter, Tracy, who received the anti-Yin injection and later gave birth to 2 healthy children, and his grandson, Scott. His commitment was so profound that he continued donating even after it became uncomfortable. He simply understood the immense power of his unique blood and the profound difference it made. When asked why he kept donating, he often replied simply, "It's something I can do." He set a world record for blood donations, surpassing 1,000 donations by 2007, and reaching his final donation, number 1,173, in 2018 when he was 81 years old. His body had simply produced too many antibodies to count, and the medical community decided it was time for him to rest, knowing his impact would endure for generations. Despite saving millions of lives and fundamentally altering the landscape of infant health, James Harrison remained relatively unknown outside of Australia and specialized medical circles for much of his life. He wasn't a public figure or a politician. He was an ordinary man whose extraordinary gift was given with unwavering consistency and quiet dedication. His heroism was not in grand speeches or dramatic rescues, but in the sustained, anonymous act of giving a part of himself for the benefit of others. His story reminds us that some of the greatest heroes walk among us, their silent contributions shaping our world in ways we can barely comprehend. A quiet guardian with golden blood. Number 7. Claudette Colvin, the teenage pioneer of civil rights. When you think of the Montgomery bus boycott and the fight against segregation, one name instantly comes to mind: Rosa Parks. Her courageous act of refusing to give up her seat on a segregated bus in 1955 became a symbol of the civil rights movement. But what if we told you there was another young woman, a teenager, who did the exact same thing 9 months earlier, laying crucial groundwork for the movement? Yet her story has largely remained in the shadows. This is the powerful and poignant story of Claudette Colvin, an unsung hero whose defiant stand should be etched into the annals of American history. Born in 1939 in Montgomery, Alabama, Claudette Colvin grew up in a deeply segregated society. She attended Booker T. Washington High School, where she was a bright student. On March 2, 1955, at just 15 years old, Claudette was riding a city bus home from school. The bus was crowded, and as more white passengers boarded, the driver, Robert Clear, ordered Claudette and 3 other black students to give up their seats to a white woman. While the other students moved, Claudette refused. Her refusal was not a spur-of-the-moment decision born of fatigue, as it was often later framed for Rosa Parks. For Claudette, it was a deeply principled and conscious act of defiance. She had been studying the Constitution in school, learning about the equal rights enshrined within it, and she felt a powerful sense of injustice. "It felt like I had a chain on me," she later recounted about the experience of segregation. "I couldn't stand it. I couldn't sit there and have them treat me like a slave." When the bus driver insisted she move, she firmly responded, "It's my constitutional right to sit here as much as that lady. We've paid our fare. It's our constitutional right." Her brave stand led to her arrest. She was forcibly removed from the bus by 2 police officers, handcuffed, and taken to jail. She was charged with disturbing the peace, violating the segregation law, or assaulting a police officer, although the assault charge was later dropped. Her arrest was swift and unyielding, a direct consequence of challenging the deeply entrenched racial hierarchy of the South. Claudette Colvin's act of defiance immediately caught the attention of local civil rights leaders, including Rosa Parks, who was then an active member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, and knew Claudette through the organization's Youth Council. Leaders in Montgomery initially considered using Claudette's case to challenge the city's segregation laws in court. Her defiance was undeniably courageous, and she had taken the first crucial step. However, as plans developed, civil rights leaders ultimately decided that Claudette was not the ideal symbol for their movement. There were several reasons for this, as detailed in historical accounts and biographies of the period. Claudette was a teenager, and at the time of her arrest she was pregnant out of wedlock, which was considered controversial and potentially damaging to the public image they wanted to project. The leaders sought a figure who was older, had a clean public record, and presented a more respectable image to a broader, predominantly white American audience. They feared that the complexities of Claudette's personal life might distract from the core message of racial injustice and dilute public sympathy. When Rosa Parks made her famous stand 9 months later, in December 1955, the circumstances were similar, but the public relations strategy was different. Parks, a respected seamstress and NAACP secretary, fit the mold of the ideal protester. Her arrest ignited the Montgomery bus boycott, a pivotal event that lasted 381 days and ultimately led to a Supreme Court ruling declaring bus segregation unconstitutional. While Rosa Parks became a national icon, Claudette Colvin faded into relative obscurity. Yet, her role was far from insignificant. Although her individual case was not pursued as the primary legal challenge, Claudette Colvin was one of 4 plaintiffs in Browder v. Gale, the landmark federal court case that successfully challenged the constitutionality of bus segregation in Montgomery. Her testimony, along with that of Aurelia Browder, Susie McDonald, and Mary Louise Smith, provided crucial evidence in the legal battle that dismantled segregation on public transportation. Historians, like Jean Theo Harris, in The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks, emphasize that the groundwork laid by earlier, lesser-known acts of defiance like Colvin's were essential for the boycott's success. For decades, Claudette Colvin's story was largely untold. Overshadowed by the more celebrated narrative, she moved to New York City in her 20s, worked as a nurse's aide, and raised her family carrying the weight of her forgotten bravery. It wasn't until later years, thanks to the efforts of historians and activists, that her pivotal role began to be recognized. She was not seeking fame. Her act was simply a spontaneous outburst against injustice. Her quiet resilience and persistence, even as her personal circumstances were scrutinized and judged, represent a different, often harder kind of heroism. Claudette Colvin's story serves as a powerful reminder that history is often far more complex and nuanced than the simplified versions we often learn. Her courage, at such a young age, ignited a spark that contributed directly to one of the most significant civil rights victories in American history. She was a true pioneer, a young woman who refused to be silent in the face of oppression, and her name deserves to be spoken alongside those who became household names. Her legacy is one of unwavering principle, a testament to the fact that even the smallest acts of defiance can ripple through time and change the course of a nation. Number 6. Vivian Thomas, the janitor who revolutionized heart surgery. Imagine being a brilliant, impetuous surgeon who pioneers a life-saving operation, yet you are denied the official title, the recognition, and the opportunities afforded to your peers, all because of the color of your skin. This is the incredible, often heartbreaking, yet ultimately triumphant story of Vivian Thomas, a self-taught surgical technician who revolutionized heart surgery, quietly saving countless lives while battling the insidious forces of racial discrimination. His contributions remained largely unsung for decades, a testament to a system that sought to diminish the achievements of Black medical professionals. Born in Louisiana in 1910, Vivian Thomas originally dreamed of becoming a doctor. However, the Great Depression shattered his plans. The economic collapse forced him to withdraw from college and take a job as a laboratory assistant at Vanderbilt University in 1930. He was hired by Dr. Alfred Blalock, a prominent surgeon, to assist with his groundbreaking research into traumatic shock. Thomas, with only a high school education, quickly demonstrated an extraordinary aptitude for surgical procedures, anatomical understanding, and meticulous laboratory work. He learned by observation, by doing, and by relentlessly pursuing knowledge. Dr. Blalock recognized Thomas's rare talent, initially referring to him as "my boy," despite Thomas being older than Blalock for a period. Thomas rapidly moved beyond a simple lab assistant role. He became a crucial partner in Blalock's research. Their work together at Vanderbilt, particularly on the causes and treatment of shock, was foundational, saving countless lives on the battlefields of World War II. Thomas designed many of the instruments and techniques used in their research, trotting his innovative genius. In 1941, when Dr. Blalock was appointed chief of surgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, he insisted that Vivian Thomas come with him. This was a significant move, as Johns Hopkins was a bastion of segregation. Thomas arrived in Baltimore to face an environment of overt racism. He was classified as a janitor for administrative purposes despite earning the highest salary of any assistant in the hospital at the time, and was often relegated to the back entrance. He wore a janitor's uniform even as he performed complex surgical procedures on animals in the research lab, procedures that mirrored human operations. Their most significant work at Johns Hopkins centered on blue baby syndrome, a congenital heart defect called tetralogy of Fallot, which caused babies to be born with dangerously low oxygen levels, giving their skin a bluish tint. Most affected infants died in early childhood. Dr. Blalock and Dr. Helen Taussig, a pediatric cardiologist, sought a surgical solution. Vivian Thomas spent months tirelessly experimenting on dogs, developing and refining the delicate surgical technique required to reroute blood flow to the lungs and effectively brew babies. His hands, steady and precise, performed hundreds of trial surgeries, perfecting the anastomosis, the joining of two blood vessels that was crucial for the operation's success. He even developed a specialized clamp for the procedure. On November 29, 1944, the first blue baby operation, known as the Blalock-Taussig shunt, was performed on a 15-month-old infant named Eileen Saxon. Dr. Blalock, though the lead surgeon, had Thomas standing on a stool behind him, guiding his every move and offering real-time instructions. "Hold that clamp," Blalock would say, or "put the suture here." Thomas's hands were the ones that had performed the technique hundreds of times. His knowledge, the critical compass. The operation was a success. Eileen Saxon's lips and fingernails turned pink, a visible miracle. This marked a watershed moment in the history of medicine, launching the era of modern cardiac surgery. Over the next few years, Thomas continued to play an indispensable role in every Blalock-Taussig shunt performed. He trained generations of surgeons, including the future chief of cardiac surgery at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Denton Cooley, and Dr. Rowena Spencer, the first woman pediatric surgeon. These accomplished doctors considered Thomas their teacher, revering his knowledge and surgical skill. Despite his invaluable contributions and being informally recognized as a surgical wizard by those who worked with him, he was never officially recognized as a surgeon, nor was he paid a surgeon's salary for decades. He faced the indignity of being denied entry to the surgeon's dining room, even as he was teaching them. For years, his story remained largely confined to Johns Hopkins, and even there it was often whispered rather than openly celebrated. It wasn't until 1971, nearly 3 decades after the first blue baby operation, that Vivian Thomas was finally given an honorary Doctor of Laws degree by Johns Hopkins University, an act of belated recognition. In 1976, he was appointed to the faculty as Instructor of Surgery, though this was primarily a title and did not fundamentally change his working responsibilities or provide full equality. Vivian Thomas's legacy was further cemented by his autobiography, Partners of the Heart, published posthumously, and later by the Emmy-winning 2004 HBO film, Something the Lord Made, which finally brought his incredible story to a wider audience. He died in 1985, having spent his life in the shadow of institutional racism, yet his ingenuity, precision, and relentless pursuit of surgical excellence fundamentally changed the lives of millions. His story serves as a powerful reminder of the countless unsung heroes, particularly those from marginalized communities whose brilliance shaped history despite systemic barriers. His hands, though never formally recognized as a surgeon's, were undeniably golden, creating a future where once fatal heart conditions could be mended. Number 5. Alice Ball, the forgotten chemist who cured leprosy. Imagine dedicating your young, brilliant mind to a devastating global disease, finding a revolutionary treatment, and then dying prematurely, only to have your groundbreaking work claimed by someone else. This tragic and inspiring story belongs to Alice Ball, an African-American chemist whose pioneering research led to the most effective treatment for leprosy in the early 20th century, yet whose name was largely erased from history for decades. Her life was short, but her impact was immense, saving countless lives and offering hope where there was once only despair. Born in Seattle, Washington in 1892, Alice Augusta Ball was a scientific prodigy. Her family had a strong lineage of photographers and chemists, which may have influenced her early interest in science. She pursued her education with remarkable determination, earning a bachelor's degree in pharmaceutical chemistry in 1912 and a second bachelor's degree in pharmacy in 1914, both from the University of Washington. Her academic brilliance stood out particularly as a woman of color in a predominantly white and male-dominated field. Her ambition led her to the University of Hawaii, where she became the first woman and the first African American to earn a master's degree in chemistry in 1915. Her master's thesis focused on the chemical properties of Piper methysticum, also known as kava, a plant with medicinal properties. Her exceptional work caught the attention of Dr. Harry Holman, a physician at Kalihi Hospital in Hawaii, who was desperately searching for an effective treatment for leprosy. At the time, leprosy, now known as Hansen's disease, was a terrifying and highly stigmatized condition. Patients were often ostracized, confined to leper colonies, and endured immense suffering. The only existing treatment involved shalmugra oil, which had been used for centuries, but was incredibly difficult for patients to take. It was thick, sticky, and had an awful taste, causing severe nausea and vomiting. When injected, it was so viscous that it caused painful abscesses and was not fully absorbed by the body. As a result, many patients refused treatment, and those who endured it often saw limited benefits. Dr. Holman believed that if the active compounds in shalmugra oil could be made water-soluble and injectable, it would be a revolutionary step forward. He challenged Alice Ball, then just 23 years old, to find a solution. Working in the University of Hawaii's chemistry lab, Alice embarked on a groundbreaking project. She isolated the active fatty acids from shalmugra oil and, through a complex chemical process, created a water-soluble ethyl ester derivative of the oil's fatty acids. This process made the oil injectable and easily absorbed by the body without causing the severe pain and nausea of previous methods. Her breakthrough was immediate and profound. The Ball method, as it came to be known, allowed for the safe and effective injection of the shalmugra oil's active components. Patients could receive the treatment regularly, leading to significant improvements in their condition and, in many cases, complete recovery. Patients began to be discharged from isolation colonies, given a new lease on life. This was the first truly effective treatment for leprosy, a monumental achievement that transformed the lives of tens of thousands of people around the world. However, tragedy struck. Alice Ball's promising career was cut short. She died in 1916 at the age of 24, possibly due to chlorine poisoning from a laboratory accident. After her death, the president of the University of Hawaii, Dr. Arthur Dean, continued her work and published her findings. Shockingly, he did so without proper attribution, even going so far as to modify her process slightly and then publish it as the Dean method. For years, Dean received the credit for Ball's revolutionary discovery, and her name faded into obscurity. Dr. Holman, the physician who initially sought Ball's help, was appalled by this injustice. He tirelessly worked to restore her credit, publishing an article in 1922 where he explicitly named her and described her crucial contribution, calling it the Ball method to ensure her name was associated with the discovery. Despite Holman's efforts, Dean's name often appeared in medical literature and textbooks for decades, overshadowing Alice Ball's true legacy. It wasn't until the late 20th and early 21st centuries, through the dedicated work of historians and researchers, that Alice Ball's story began to resurface. Scholarly articles, biographies, and historical accounts have since meticulously reconstructed her life and her immense contributions. Today, the University of Hawaii acknowledges her as the true discoverer of the leprosy treatment, and a plaque honors her at the school. In 2000, the state of Hawaii officially declared February 29 as Alice Ball Day in recognition of her groundbreaking work. Alice Ball's story is a stark reminder of the systemic biases that have often marginalized the achievements of women and people of color in science and history. Her brilliance, cut tragically short, brought hope and healing to a world suffering from a terrifying disease. She was a quiet revolutionary in the laboratory, an unsung hero whose legacy is etched not just in scientific discovery, but in the millions of lives improved and saved by the treatment she pioneered. Her struggle for recognition though belated, ensures that her light, once dimmed by injustice, now shines brightly as a testament to her enduring impact. Number 4. Mary Seacole, the forgotten pioneer nurse of the Crimean War. When you think of the Crimean War and nursing, one name dominates the narrative: Florence Nightingale, the Lady with the Lamp. Her invaluable contributions to military nursing are well deserved. But what if we told you there was another extraordinary woman, a black Jamaican healer and entrepreneur who defied racial prejudice and colonial bureaucracy to bring compassionate care to wounded soldiers on the Crimean front, often in even more perilous conditions? Her name was Mary Seacole, and her story is a vibrant, adventurous, and tragically overlooked chapter in humanitarian history. Born Mary Jane Grant in Kingston, Jamaica, in 1805, Mary Seacole grew up in a vibrant, mixed-race family. Her mother, a doctress, practiced traditional Jamaican medicine and herbal remedies, teaching Mary the art of nursing and healing from a young age. Her father was a Scottish soldier. Mary inherited a fierce independence, a sharp business acumen, and an insatiable desire to travel and help others. She gained extensive nursing experience treating cholera, yellow fever, and other diseases in Jamaica and Panama, earning a reputation for her skill and bravery during epidemics. When the Crimean War broke out in 1853, stories of the dire conditions and inadequate medical care for British soldiers reached the Caribbean. Mary Seacole, despite being in her late 40s, felt an overwhelming compulsion to go and offer her services. She traveled to London in 1854, brimming with confidence in her nursing abilities and her experience in tropical medicine. She applied to the War Office and to Florence Nightingale's contingent of nurses, believing her practical experience would be invaluable. However, Mary Seacole was repeatedly denied. The reasons were thinly veiled racial prejudice and institutional bureaucracy. Despite her proven skills and extensive experience, her applications were rejected time and again. One official, according to her autobiography, even suggested she was too old, which she vehemently refuted. Undeterred by these dismissals, and with an unyielding determination to serve, Mary decided she would go to Crimea on her own terms. She financed her own journey using her Otapel spirit. She established a British hotel near Balaclava, Crimea, a combination of a general store, a catering service, and a convalescent home, provided food, drink, and comfort to British soldiers, often serving them directly on the battlefield. But her primary mission was always nursing. She would venture out onto the battlefields, often under heavy fire, carrying medical supplies, food, and bandages, tending to the wounded soldiers of all nationalities. She applied poultices, dressed wounds, and provided comfort, earning the affectionate nickname Mother Seacole from the soldiers she nursed. Unlike Nightingale, whose work was primarily within organized military hospitals, Seacole operated on the front lines, often amidst the chaos of battle. Her approach was practical, hands-on, and deeply personal. She understood the immediate needs of men suffering from cholera, dysentery, and battlefield injuries. She provided not just medical care, but also emotional support, a kind word, and a familiar face in a foreign land. Her autobiography, Wonderful Adventures of Mrs. Seacole in Many Lands, published in 1857, vividly details her daring exploits and compassionate care. She described being so close to the fighting that bullets would rip through her skirts, and she was once struck in the face by a spent cannonball. When the war ended in 1856, Mary Seacole found herself bankrupt. Her selfless dedication meant she had poured all her resources into helping the soldiers, never turning anyone away, regardless of their ability to pay. Upon her return to England, a Seacole Fund was established to help her, championed by various prominent figures, including members of the royal family. She was celebrated briefly by soldiers who adored her, but her fame was fleeting. Over time, Mary Seikol's story was largely overshadowed by Florence Nightingale's, and she was almost completely forgotten in British history for nearly a century. Her race played a significant role in this erasure. The historical narratives of the Victorian era, shaped by colonial biases, found it easier to celebrate a white upper-class woman who reformed institutions than a mixed-race woman who defied them and practiced a more traditional hands-on style of care. It wasn't until the late 20th and early 21st centuries, driven by historians and Black British activists, that a concerted effort was made to revive her legacy. Today, Mary Seacole is recognized as a vital figure in nursing history. A statue of her was unveiled in London in 2016, a powerful symbol of her belated recognition. Her courage, compassion, and Othamel spirit in overcoming systemic barriers make her an enduring inspiration. She didn't wait for permission or acceptance. She forged her own path to serve humanity. A truly unsung hero who deserves to stand equally alongside the most celebrated figures in humanitarian aid. Her unwavering commitment to healing in the face of both war and prejudice paints a picture of a remarkable individual who saw a need and fulfilled it, no matter the cost. Number 3. Ignaz Semmelweis, the doctor who washed his hands. Imagine a simple, life-saving truth staring doctors in the face, a truth so obvious in retrospect, yet actively rejected and ridiculed by the medical establishment of its time. This is the tragic story of Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian physician whose relentless pursuit of hygiene in mid-19th century hospitals could have saved millions of lives from a horrific killer, childbed fever. He was a visionary who was dismissed as mad, his brilliance unsung for decades until after his own death. Born in 1818, Ignaz Philipp Semmelweis studied medicine and specialized in obstetrics. In 1847, he took up a position as assistant professor at the first obstetrical clinic of the Vienna General Hospital. At this hospital, as in most lying in hospitals across Europe, a devastating and mysterious illness, known as puerperal fever or childbed fever, was rampant. It was a terrifying infection that claimed the lives of new mothers shortly after childbirth. The mortality rates were shockingly high, often between 10 to 35% in some wards, turning the joyous event of birth into a death sentence for many. Semmelweis observed a perplexing phenomenon. The mortality rate from childbed fever was significantly higher in the first clinic, which was staffed by male doctors and medical students, compared to the second clinic, which was staffed by female midwives. This stark difference troubled him deeply. He meticulously analyzed every variable he could think of, from climate and diet to overcrowding, and even the position in which women gave birth. Nothing explained the disparity. The turning point came with the death of his friend Jakob Koliczka, a pathologist, who died after accidentally being pricked with a scalpel during an autopsy. Koliczka's symptoms before death were remarkably similar to those of the women dying from childbed fever. Semmelweis had an epiphany. Medical students and doctors in the first clinic frequently performed autopsies on deceased patients, then proceeded directly to examine pregnant women in the labor ward, often without washing their hands or changing their clothes. He theorized that cadaverous particles, what we now know as bacteria and viruses, were being transferred from the autopsy room to the birthing mothers. The midwives in the second clinic did not perform autopsies, explaining their lower mortality rates. His solution was incredibly simple, yet revolutionary: hand washing. In May 1847, Semmelweis mandated that all doctors and medical students in the first clinic thoroughly wash their hands with a chlorinated lime solution before examining patients. This powerful disinfectant was chosen because it effectively removed the putrid smell of cadavers, suggesting it also removed whatever invisible particles were causing the infection. The results were astonishing. Within a few months, the mortality rate from childbed fever in the first clinic plummeted from 18% to a mere 2%, and later even lower. approaching zero. For a disease that had terrorized maternity wards for centuries, this was nothing short of a miracle. Semmelweis had, without knowing about germ theory, which would be fully articulated by Louis Pasteur years later, discovered the fundamental principle of antisepsis. Despite overwhelming empirical evidence, Semmelweis's findings were met with fierce resistance, skepticism, and outright hostility from the medical community. The prevailing medical theories of the time attributed diseases to bad air, miasma theory, or imbalances in the body. The idea that doctors themselves, revered figures of authority, could be responsible for transmitting a deadly disease was an unbearable affront to their pride and status. They found the suggestion insulting and beneath their dignity. It was unthinkable that their unwashed hands were the cause of death. Semmelweis struggled to articulate his findings in a way that resonated with his peers, and he failed to publish a comprehensive book until years later. He was unable to gain widespread acceptance or implementation of his simple, life-saving practice. He was ridiculed, ostracized, and ultimately fired from his position in Vienna. He returned to Hungary, where he continued to advocate for hand-washing, often with increasing frustration and bitterness due to the stubborn resistance he faced. His mental health suffered, likely exacerbated by the rejection of his life's work and the knowledge that countless mothers were still dying preventable deaths. He was eventually committed to an asylum in 1865, where, ironically, he died 2 weeks later from a gangrenous wound, a likely result of an infection, a tragically poetic end for the man who championed cleanliness. He was only 47 years old. It was not until years after his death, with the work of Louis Pasteur confirming germ theory and Joseph Lister introducing antiseptic surgery, that Semmelweis's insights were finally vindicated. His groundbreaking discovery, dismissed as a feverish fancy during his lifetime, became the cornerstone of modern medical hygiene. He died a broken man, an unsung hero whose profound contribution was recognized only when it was too late for him to witness the millions of lives saved by his simple yet revolutionary act of washing hands. His legacy stands as a stark reminder of the perils of intellectual arrogance and the quiet bravery required to challenge established norms, even when saving lives hangs in the balance. Number 2. Bayard Rustin, the architect of the March on Washington. What if one of the most pivotal moments in American history, a moment that dramatically reshaped the civil rights movement, was meticulously planned and executed by a brilliant strategist whose contributions were deliberately sidelined due to societal prejudices? That is the complex and often overlooked story of Bayard Rustin, the openly gay black pacifist and activist, whose unparalleled organization genius was the true engine behind the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, yet whose name rarely appears alongside the movement's most celebrated figures. Born in Westchester, Pennsylvania in 1912, Bayard Rustin was raised by his maternal grandparents. His grandmother was an active member of the NAACP, exposing him to civil rights activism from a young age. Rustin was a Quaker, deeply committed to pacifism and nonviolent resistance, principles that would guide his entire life. He became a lifelong advocate for social justice, human rights, and economic equality, often ahead of his time in his views and activism. Rustin's activism began in the 1930s and 1940s. He became a prominent figure in the early civil rights movement, advocating for desegregation. His commitment to nonviolent direct action led him to become a key organizer for the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, where he helped plan the Journey of Reconciliation in 1947, a precursor to the Freedom Rides, testing a Supreme Court ruling against segregation in interstate travel. For this, he served a 22-day sentence on a chain gang, an experience he later wrote about, exposing the brutality of the Southern penal system. His unique blend of intellectual rigor, strategic vision, and practical organizing skills made him invaluable. He was instrumental in teaching Martin Luther King Jr. the principles of non-violent resistance, drawing on his own deep study of Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy. Rustin served as a crucial advisor to King, helping to establish the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLAW, and guiding its early campaigns. He authored articles on non-violent direct action and trained activists in the techniques of peaceful protest. However, Rustin faced significant challenges due to his identity. He was openly gay at a time when homosexuality was not only taboo, but also illegal, and his sexuality was considered a major liability by many in the civil rights movement. Additionally, his past associations with communism, though brief and largely in his youth, were used by political opponents to discredit the movement. These factors led to him being deliberately pushed into the background, often acting as an anonymous force behind the scenes. His most monumental achievement, and perhaps the one that most vividly shaped his unsung heroism, was the organization of the 1963 March on Washington. The idea of a massive demonstration in the nation's capital had been floated for years, but it was Rustin who transformed it from a concept into a meticulously orchestrated reality. Appointed deputy director of the march under a Philip Randolph, who was the titular director, but largely left the day-to-day work to Rustin. Rustin had only 8 weeks to pull off what many considered an impossible feat. Quote, "He managed every single detail, from logistics to publicity. His genius lay in his ability to coordinate an immense number of moving parts, recruiting and transporting over 250,000 people from across the country, arranging for thousands of portable toilets, providing food and water, securing sound systems for multiple speakers, deploying marshals for security, and coordinating with police, and ordering sound systems for multiple speakers to ensure peacefuls for security." He famously detailed the precise number of sandwiches needed, 80,000, and the number of buses required to transport people, over 2,000. Historical accounts and interviews with march participants confirm his relentless attention to detail and his exceptional ability to foresee and manage potential problems. He worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and an unwavering belief in the cause. The march was an unprecedented success, a peaceful gathering of 250,000 people of all races, culminating in Martin Luther King Jr.'s iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. It put immense pressure on Congress to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It was a master class in non-violent organization, a testament to Rustin's strategic brilliance. Yet, despite this triumph, Rustin's visibility was intentionally limited. Many leaders feared that his homosexuality would be used by opponents to undermine the march's credibility. Powerful figures within the movement, including some who admired his work, pressured King to distance himself from Rustin. As a result, Rustin was not allowed to speak at the march, nor was he prominently featured in many of the official narratives that followed. After the march, Rustin continued his activism, focusing on economic justice, human rights, and advocating for gay rights, a cause he championed long before it gained mainstream acceptance. He consistently pushed for a broader understanding of civil rights, arguing that economic equality was fundamental to true freedom. He testified before Congress, wrote extensively, and served as a crucial voice for social change until his death in 1987. For decades, his name was largely absent from school, textbooks, and popular histories of the civil rights movement. Only in recent years has his incredible contribution begun to receive the recognition it deserves, with scholars and activists bringing his story to light. In 2013, President Barack Obama posthumously awarded Bayard Rustin the Presidential Medal of Freedom, acknowledging his vital role in the civil rights movement. Rustin's life is a powerful reminder that heroes come in many forms, and often the most able work is done quietly, diligently, and bravely in the face of societal prejudice. He was truly the unsung architect who built the stage for one of history's most resonant calls for justice. Number 1. Stanislav Petrov, the man who saved the world. Imagine a night in 1983, a Cold War at its peak, and a highly classified bunker deep beneath Moscow. Suddenly, alarms blare, flashing lights illuminate a map, and a computer screen blazes with a horrifying message. Multiple intercontinental ballistic missiles have been launched from the United States, heading straight for the Soviet Union. The fate of the entire world, billions of lives, hangs in the balance. In that moment of ultimate crisis, a single Soviet officer, defying protocol and acting on a gut feeling, made a decision that prevented a global nuclear apocalypse. His name was Stanislav Petrov, and for decades his act of incredible courage and wisdom remained a secret, making him arguably the most able unsung hero of the 20th century. Born in 1939, Stanislav Yevgrakovich Petrov was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces. On September 26, 1983, he was the duty officer at Serpukhov 15, the secret command center outside Moscow that was responsible for monitoring the Soviet Union's OKO nuclear early warning satellite system. This was a period of extreme tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. Just weeks prior, the Soviets had shot down Korean Airlines Flight 7, killing all 269 people on board, including a US congressman, escalating already strained relations. Both superpowers were on hair-trigger alert, with their nuclear arsenals pointed at each other. Precisely 12:40 m. Moscow time, the unthinkable happened. The OKO system, designed to detect incoming ballistic missiles, reported a launch from the United States. The screen glowed "Start," indicating a high-confidence launch. Moments later, the system reported a second missile, then a third, fourth, and fifth. Computer system, the most advanced in the Soviet arsenal, was reporting 5 missiles, a limited strike from an American base. The standard Soviet military doctrine, in response to such an attack, was immediate, full-scale nuclear retaliation. Protocol was clear. Report the detection up the chain of command, and a counterattack would be initiated. Every alarm was screaming, every light flashing red. Other officers in the bunker were in a state of panic, their faces tense with the gravity of the situation. Petrov, however, remained outwardly calm, though his mind was racing. He was the one who had to make the initial call to confirm or deny the legitimacy of the alert. He had to decide whether to report a full-scale attack, which would almost certainly trigger a retaliatory strike and lead to global thermonuclear war. His decision was based on several crucial observations and a profound intuition. Firstly, the system reported only 5 missiles. If the US were launching a first strike, Petrov reasoned, it would be an all-out attack, not just a few missiles. It would involve hundreds, if not thousands, of missiles to overwhelm Soviet defenses. A strike of only 5 missiles seemed illogical for a full-scale assault. Secondly, the ground-based radar systems, which would confirm the satellite's findings, showed no corroborating evidence of launches. The ground radars were crucial for confirmation, and they remained silent. These inconsistencies, despite the blaring alarms and flashing lights, led Petrov to suspect a malfunction. He knew the OKO system was relatively new and had known issues with false alarms, particularly those caused by sunlight reflecting off clouds, which could be misinterpreted as missile launches. It was late at night in Moscow, but dawn would have been breaking over the US, potentially creating such a reflection. Defying established military protocol which dictated that he should report the detected launches immediately, Petrov chose to trust his judgment. He reported the incident as a system malfunction to his superiors, rather than confirming a missile attack. He knew he was taking an enormous risk. If he was wrong and a real attack was underway, he would be responsible for the destruction of his country. If he was right, he might face severe punishment for disobeying orders. Petrov's decision gave crucial time for the Soviet military to analyze the situation further. Within minutes, it became clear there were no actual missiles. The ecosystem had indeed malfunctioned, later determined to be a flaw in the program that confused sunlight reflections with missile launches, a situation that could only occur under specific orbital alignments of the satellite with the Earth, the Sun, and the launch sites. The world had narrowly avoided nuclear war thanks to one man's skepticism and cool-headedness. For his actions, Stanislav Petrov was initially praised by his superior officer, General Yuri Voltintsev, who was the commander of the Soviet Air Defense's missile defense units. However, Petrov was not rewarded. Instead, he was quietly reprimanded for not properly documenting the incident in the military logbook and for minor procedural infractions. The incident itself, deemed a potentially embarrassing weakness in the Soviet defense system, was classified as top secret, effectively silencing Petrov and his story for decades. The Soviet Union could not afford to publicize a system failure that nearly triggered a nuclear war. Petrov retired from military service in 1984, suffering from a nervous breakdown and high blood pressure, likely due to the immense stress of that night and the subsequent lack of recognition. His story remained buried until the collapse of the Soviet Union. It was brought to light by General Voltintsev in his memoirs in the late 1990s. Only then did the world begin to understand the immense debt it owed to this unassuming man. Stanislav Petrov lived a quiet, modest life in a small apartment outside Moscow, largely forgotten by the world he saved. Passed away in 2017. He never considered himself a hero, often saying he was just doing his job. But his refusal to panic, his critical thinking in the face of terrifying odds, and his courageous decision to override a faulty system stand as a testament to the power of human judgment over blind adherence to technology. He was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, honored by the United Nations, and became the subject of documentaries. But for most of his life, his heroic act remained a secret. Stanislav Petrov was truly the man who saved the world, an unsung hero whose silent act of defiance kept humanity from destroying itself.